Hey guys, my guest tonight, Chris Boris, is a first ever ghost behaviorist. He's come up with a groundbreaking ghost classification system that helps him identify, aid, and heal spirits. We'll see you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Welcome to California Haunts Radio. My name is Charlotte, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so, and I've got a great guest lined up for us. His name is Chris Boris, and where does he have some really cool stuff to tell us? In the meantime, I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of lovely Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state, and that means we can get to you no matter where you're at. We have people almost in every, well, not every county, but we have people for counties that we can get to you to help you out. All right? So you can find me on Facebook and Twitter, and you can find us on Instagram, and you can find us over at TikTok as well. Anyway, cutting to the chase. If you're watching from Facebook and you like what you see tonight, be sure to hit that follow button. If you're watching from YouTube, there's a little ghost in the bottom right-hand corner with a magnifying glass and a Sherlock Holmes hat on. That is our mascot, and click on that, and that'll subscribe you to our videos. There's more than 450 videos sitting over there of differing topics. I am a journalist. I'm also a photojournalist, so I don't only do ghosty stuff, I do other stuff as well, so I'm sure there's something over there that you'd find of interest. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring our guest on because I'm excited to talk to this gentleman, because after doing this gig for 25 years, he and I have some similar ideas about what ghosts are and how to categorize them. So let me bring him on. Hello, Chris.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You had to sit through all that. Whoa. It's going to be that kind of day, huh? Tell me about yourself, sir.
Yeah, certainly. So I call myself a ghost behaviorist. I'm the very first one. And I call myself that because what I do is separated from what a ghost hunter does. I feel like a ghost hunter likes to go out to the field and substantiate that spirits exist. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I've been there, done that a decade ago. I know they exist. I'm trying to find that next step, the next level. I'm trying to get into the psyche of a spirit, which I actually call discarnate psychology. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to create a new branch of psychology just through, interacting with spirits. And I tell you this, by using psychology, Eastern philosophy, these aren't things that ghost hunters put in their toolbox. So by using things like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Kabbalah, psychology, and putting those all in one banner, I'm able to get some really groundbreaking things in this field that you probably haven't heard about. So if you're sick of hearing the same thing over and over and over again, sick of the ghost hunting shows doing the same thing over and over again, this will be this podcast will be a fresh breath of air for you.
After listening to you on other podcasts and being on your YouTube page, I can honestly say that, like I said, not everything we agree on arm in arm, but I mean, there is stuff like, for instance, this Woodland Opera House here in Woodland, we have two distinct ghosts in there, and one is the guy that died in there from the fire, and the other one is the guy that set the fire. And what he told us via, dowsing raw psychics and all that communication was that he's there because the guy that set the fire is afraid to cross over. So he is there to kind of torment the guy that's, to I don't know if I want to use the word torment, but he's there to harass the guy that set the fire because it took his life.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So so that's one of the things I thought was kind of a parallel with kind of like, what you're doing and how you go about, classifying the ghosts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you want me to get into my spiel now, but I have 7 different classifications that I've come up with. And, the list has kind of morphed over time. When I wrote my first book, Ghost Hunting 2.0, it just, I wanted to address spirits that no one has ever talked about before. Like case in point, one of the type of spirits that I kept running into were these spirits that had no affiliation with a location, but they're just wandering in, they'd interact with you and then wander out of the location. No one has ever talked about wandering spirits before. And the 100+ ghost hunting shows that I've ever seen,
Right.
they don't really talk about it either. And it would solve a lot of problems that these, so-called professionals in the field, are going up against in these cases. What I find is spirits are attracted all over the place in the afterlife. So, I have a classification for wandering spirits. And then if their cravings and whatever spins out of control, they sit there, they're squatters, they become parasites. So I have a parasitic class of spirits that are just, constantly feeding off the area. And I find, once you cut off that food source, they're on to the next thing. So we have to come up with a new classification system. And I don't have the diagram here to show you, but this is what I call the flow chart to the afterlife that I came up with. It's right here. I made a couple tweaks and changes to it. This is in my book. I released this in 2016, but in this book, I talk about 6 classifications. I've actually come up with 7 now to address the parasitic class, but I can roll through all those if you want me to.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. My thought was, when you talk about the parasitic class too, is that once there's a doorway in a building and people become accepting of the ghosts that are there, then you get these guys that come in off the street, or these ghosts that come in off the street. Because I remember doing a dowsing rod session in Old Town Placerville, and the psychic came back laughing because she says, they're lined up in the middle of the street to come talk to you. And I said, okay. Yeah. So I sat there for hours, and it's just like there's some that are so hungry for that interaction with humans,
right?
Again,
right. And I think once you step out of, the Catholic religion, which is the dominant religion when it comes to the ghost hunting field. Or, well, maybe not, because I find that a lot of ghost hunters, the majority of ghost hunters, don't really put religion into their ghost hunting session. But as far as demonologists and exorcists go, yeah, it's dominantly Catholic or Catholicism. And once you take a step out of that religion and into other religions like Kabbalah, Judaism, the Tibetan system, you start to see that they have all kinds of stories and methodologies that line up to the classification system that I've laid out here. Case in point, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, one of the main spirits that you run into are what they call the hungry ghost. There's actually different realms that they point out. And what I find, this is the linchpin of my classification system, where I find that once a spirit crosses over, 9 times out of 10, you're going to turn to a hungry spirit. And don't think of hungry as a physical hunger. It's a psychological hunger. When they pass over, they're going to have like a craving for unfinished business, trying to fix something that has spiraled out of control in their life. And what I find is that the level of hunger determines where you go from there in the afterlife. So if if you die abruptly, and your mind space is just not ready for the afterlife, you're going to become a confused spirit, because you're just like, what just happened? And we find these in, highways and byways and places of great tragedy, where, people died in a split second. So we have the confused spirits, and these can evolve into residual hauntings. And we can talk about that later.
Sure.
Then I have the classifications of the 2 hungry spirits that, you become introverted, you're scared of the afterlife, or you're extroverted. You're like, hey, this is cool. And then, of course, that's the stuck spirit, which you find in closets and basements and things like that. And the extroverted is the wandering spirit, which I kind of addressed. But they're like a tourist of the afterlife. They're like, hey, this is pretty cool. Let me just go here, bounce all over the place. And then the hunger, which I call the hunger sliding scale. So if it's on the more extreme side, that's where we get the parasitic type spirits that are just, they come in. You find a lot of these at bars. Okay. And this is why rabbis always bless their drink and food before eating and ingesting, because these spirits love to come in and feed off people's vices, because they feed off their cravings of alcohol and smoking and just gluttony and stuff like that. That's where we get the 7 deadly sins. And so they're just partaking in that. So if you go to like bars and frequent places like that, that's where you'll find those type of spirits. They'll come in, hang out, and then they're gone. And I found in my own personal life, when I've been into bars and things like that, you always notice one corner that's darker than the other. It's probably where they're hanging out at. And then, of course, once the hunger, if you're, in the afterlife and your hunger is totally spun out of control, you can't control yourself, you become what I call a destructive spirit. And this is where we get, the demonic types and things like that. You get the drunk, the alcoholic type personality where it's like you're taking their drink away and they're like, I can't think for myself, and just spiraling out of control and manipulating the physical realm, and is just dealing with like a tantruming child, so to speak. So I think I covered all. Oh, the helper spirit is the last one, which, these are spirits. They could be angels. They could be loved ones that have passed on, but they're hanging around. They've got the most minimal amount of hunger psychologically, but they're only hanging around because they're waiting for a loved one to pass on. They want to watch their kids grow up, grandkids grow up, and they jump in and help out from time to time. So those are the 7 classifications that I've come up with.
Now, you've been doing this for a long time, and you have you studied psychology. What else have you studied?
Yes, psychology, the Tibetan culture, Buddhism, Kabbalah, Judaism, sociology, psychology. Just every little bit helps. And I just take a piece from here and there and put it together, and it just really brings this field up a notch. And just to show you how impactful coming at the field with this mindset is, the very first time that I went to a location with this new methodology that I use, I ended up getting a 90-minute interaction with a spirit. Now, you may say 90 minutes, that is ridiculous, but it happened. It's documented. It's on I have a YouTube channel called Ghost Doctor. It's the very first episode where I caught, it's at the St. Augustine Lighthouse, and I ended up getting into an interaction with the spirit, 90 minutes long. A year later, I got into another interaction that was 60 minutes long, and they just kept coming. 60 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. So this is like revolutionizing the field. And it's funny because I when I go to the established celebrities in this field, and I go to them, I'm like, look, man, I've got a revolutionary way of coming at the spirit world. I ended up getting a 90-minute interaction with a spirit. They just look at me like, seriously, what? Because you watch these shows, and the longest interaction they get is probably a minute, 2. Right. So 90 minutes, that's unheard of. And I'm able to pull things out from the spirits that I don't think anybody's ever heard before. Case in point, when I was talking to the spirit in the St. Augustine Lighthouse, we got into this line of questioning about the afterlife. And I noticed when I started to ask questions about, okay, well, is being alive the same as being dead? And I was asking certain questions about the afterlife. At first I thought, okay, well, she's probably sensitive to a couple things. But as the conversation went on, every time I'd ask these questions, she would back away from the conversation and stop communicating with us. So I had to use some psychological ploys to reel her back in. And once we did that, the conversation was just humming along. And I'd ask these questions, she'd pull away again. So then the question was asked, okay, so are there certain things I'm not allowed to ask you here? She said, yes. I said, okay, well, will you get in trouble if you talk about these things? Yes. So then I asked, all right, $1 million question. Are there rules to the afterlife you have to follow? She said, yes. So that just in itself just blows the lid off the paranormal field, because how many sticking points do you see investigators get into when they're in a location, they're asking questions, things are humming along, and then all of a sudden, boom. The conversation just comes to a complete halt. So this is just, you're starting to see how the sausage is made, basically, in the afterlife. So, yeah, this was 2012. Right. I've put so many things together. So, when I say I'm a ghost behaviorist, I don't say that lightly, and I don't want. I know once I get popular, there's going to be ghost behaviorists popping up all over the place. So it's going to just be insane. But, you have to have that body of knowledge behind you, because when you're interacting with these spirits, and I'm sorry for just running on with my
No,
conversation here.
that's fine. Just go with it. Let's
Okay.
go with it.
So, when I'm doing this stuff, you have to rely on all your education. You just can't go in there and be like, well, I hate to keep using the paranormal celebrities as an example, but I feel like at this point they're just resting on their laurels. They're like, oh, people will just watch me do my thing, and I'll just go on TV and just ghost hunt like I've done since 2010.
Go wave my wands
And
around. Yeah.
yeah, and the problem with that is people are tuning out. Like the paranormal TV landscape is at the lowest ratings that it's ever been. It's crazy. But what I was trying to get back to is when I do this, there's a certain methodology that I use, and oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. But you have to have that skill level to launch yourself forward and say, shoot, I completely lost my train of thought.
You've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this for a long time. And when you go out, you're pretty well, you come in contact with enough stuff to be able to sit there and figure it and start thinking about it and think, well, maybe I didn't have good contact with this one. Why didn't I have good contact with this one? Let's try this.
Right.
And then you start reevaluating the contact that you've had, and then you start coming up with these things that you come up with, because it makes for better contact to communicate.
Right, and that's what I was trying to get at. It slipped my mind, but you refreshed my memory. How I come at the field is, I want to be. When we look at a doctor's practice when he's dealing with patients, he doesn't diagnose every patient the exact same way. And when I'm out in the field, I have that same kind of mentality. I just can't go in and start, going at every single spirit the exact same way. There is a methodology to this. So when I'm talking to a spirit, my mind's got to be working overdrive the entire time, because when I get into an interaction with a spirit, every little thing they say, I have to be very cognizant of, because the way they answer things and come at me will tailor my approach to how I come at them. Because look, I have 7 classifications. I found that each different classification has different needs. They have different wants. And to remedy the situation, you have to come at them in a variety of different ways. You just can't throw stuff at the wall. And I feel that's where we are now with the field. Everybody's just like, well, I come at the field in this manner, and that's the only way you come at it. But the problem is, it's like one of those fix-it-all tools. You just can't have everything on one little widget. You have to have a separate way of doing things for every spirit type.
Well, I've been out on investigations, not with my team, but with other teams, where I've seen them. You're talking to somebody from the 1850s, maybe a woman, and they'll go, "You know what this is?" And they'll slap a cell phone down. This is a telephone. And I'm like, she doesn't know what that is. What are you doing with that? It's not going to get a reaction. She has no clue what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's why I carry trigger objects. I mean, to make sure, I've got little perfume bottles and all kinds of stuff that I take with me, antiques, to get attention. But I mean, I understand what you're saying, because, it's like a one size fits all. Let's go talk to this ghost here. It just keeps throwing out questions that the ghost probably doesn't even either understand or care about.
Right, and this is where sociology really comes into play, because if I'm talking to somebody from the 1850s, okay, you have to know the social norms of that day.
Yep.
Because if you don't, they're going to cast you out of their little circle. And I like to refer back to, society is built upon high school principles. The cafeteria. When you go into a cafeteria in the lunchroom, you can see it playing out in real time. You have the table for the jocks, you have the table for the cheerleaders, the goth kids, the band kids. And what was cool about me in high school was I was able to go to any table I want, because I knew the social norms of every little group. If I go into to the table with the jocks, you had to talk about sports and whatnot. And then if you go over to the band kids, you had to talk about music and band camps and whatever. So you have to know the social norms, and if you don't, you'll be cast out of that little circle. Right. And what I find is when you go into these haunted locations, and you only have a certain amount of time to present yourself in the best light to this spirit, or they're going to be like, I don't want to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes back to sociology, and even guys out there, guys, when you're picking up girls, okay, you only have this small window to put your best foot forward, or the girls could be like, yeah, I don't see him as a suitor or something like that. Once you miss that window, you're on the out. So you really have to come at the spirit world in a deeper level of understanding that, hey, I know what you're going through. There's times where I go to locations where I'll sit down, I'll be very quiet, and then I'll sit down and just have a one-on-one chat, and I'll be like, look, I know what you went through. After you died, you probably looked in a mirror, didn't see a reflection, and you're probably just going, I don't understand what's going on here. And that's 99% of spirits. So if you come at them at that level, it's like, hey, this guy's personable. He knows me. I want to talk to this guy. I don't want to talk to the thousands of other ghost hunters that come in here and go, can you make a noise for me? They've been there, done that. So if you go in there and you're like, hey, I can relate to you. I want to help you. I want to pray for you. And by the way, I find that a lot of spirits, when I'm interacting with them, they want prayers. So, pray for them. And that's a lot of times why they're there. You
are so refreshing to talk to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic.
And I try to be very different. When it just drove me crazy, because when I did research for this was back in 2016. It drove me crazy because I would read paranormal book after paranormal book that I swear they could all just sue each other, because they're just like plagiarizing. It's like one book after another, and at this point of the game, I try very hard to talk about things that you have never heard of in the field, like classification systems. Who the heck has ever heard that stuff? Let's get down to the bottom of residual hauntings. I've never heard anybody give an example like I have that explains everything in the residual world. Or why can't spirits be caught on film? And I found out there is a principle in the quantum mechanics that explains everything of why you really can't get spirits to manifest on film. And it's called the uncertainty principle, that says when the observer is viewing a certain space and time, if I want a spirit to manifest right here, and I'm looking right here at that spirit, it can't happen, because this principle says the observer collapses the quantum state. A spirit has to manipulate the quantum state to break into our realm, okay? Because it's not from our physical realm. It's from this ghost realm. So it's got to cross this bridge into our universe. So in order to do that, it can only do it for a couple, a split second before it's canceled out of our universe, because since I'm looking in this area, I'm collapsing that quantum state it's trying to break into. This is why a lot of times when you research demonic hauntings, and a paranormal investigator will go into a room, be like, can you make something happen to us? And 9 times out of 10, something will happen in the room next to them. And that's because the demonic force cannot manifest in the room that they're in and everybody's watching. So they're going off in the other room and doing the thing. And I put this theory to the test many, many times. I was in the basement of this location. We were trying to get this spirit of a boy to move a ball. And I had a meter out, and I said, well, can you move this ball? He's like, yes, I can. So I said, okay, well, we waited a few seconds. I'm like, okay, well, are you trying to move it? He's like, yeah. So I told everybody, I was like, okay, look away. Everybody just look away for 10 seconds. We all looked away. We looked back, and I tell you, this ball moved. It wasn't much. It was like a couple centimeters, but it still moved. And that proved the point that the uncertainty principle does exist in the paranormal field.
Fascinating stuff.
So yeah, I just want to talk, about stuff that has never been heard about before. And, I'm passionate about this stuff. I want to launch the field forward, but it's so hard because the people, the paranormal celebrities in place, there's only like 20 some of them. And it drives me nuts because they keep getting cast in the same shows, and you see them keep coming back over and over again. I'm like, you're not giving us nothing new. Even in the press releases, they're like, we're going to show you next level ghost hunting. And it drives me nuts because I'm like, well, wait a minute. I coined that phrase in 2018 for one. And then if you tune into the show, you're like, well, what is new exactly? You're showing us new equipment, but you're not showing us anything new per se, because you're still doing the same thing since 2010. So yeah, it's just a frustration, but I love the field at the same time. So double-edged sword.
I don't watch those shows either. They drive me nuts. I just can't watch them, and it's like it's on repeat all the time. And that's one of the things that, like I say, the personable part of it. Like I said, what I used to find frustrating with, I'm not going to name the shows because I don't want to get sued here, but where they go in and they're just stabbing in the dark. Are you a man or a woman? Blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And it's just those stupid little mundane questions they keep asking over and over, where, like you say, you can get in once you find out who you're dealing with or what you're dealing with. You can aim with more pointed questions in to warm them up to speak with you. And I agree with you 100% with that.
Right. I mean, it's okay to go into a situation and be like, well, are you man, woman? But what's your end game? And I find that a lot of these ghost hunters, they don't have an end game. They're just trying to feel things out, suss things out, or whatever. But when it comes to me, as a ghost behaviorist, when I'm asking these questions, I have an end game in mind. I'm like, okay, well, we need to figure out, what you are, who you are, why you're here, and if I can help you, because that is what we need to happen. You can't just stay here and haunt the place. And even if we're pushing you out, you're just going to go to another location and haunt that location. So, what are we really doing here? Are we really helping people or helping the spirits? No, we're not. We're just sending them to, like, pack your bags, get your shit, get out of here. so I don't know if I'm supposed. This is part of my language.
It's okay. When you say helping people or helping the spirits, how do you help them? What do you do once you find out what's going on with them? How do you assist them?
Yeah, so I like to pray for them. If you can see my background here, I have a lot of Eastern artwork and mandalas and things like that. So when I go into a location, I find that now 9 times out of 10, all the spirits really want is to know. Well, there's a couple of things. Sometimes spirits just want to let the loved ones know that they're there. And once that happens, they can start the process of kind of moving away from the physical realm and doing their thing. Because if a loved one sees that the person that they left behind is still grieving, that's going to connect them, and they're going to try so hard to show that they're there. That in the end becomes their hunger. And they got to make sure that hunger doesn't spin out of control, because that just leads to worse things on the classification list. But, once that's out of the way, then they can start the healing process. But 9 times out of 10, what I find is spirits want prayers. And this is just very prevalent in a lot of different religions, especially like the Mexican religion, the Tibetan religion, the Jewish religion. Pray for your loved ones that have passed on. And that's all they really want, because what I find is, especially in the Eastern culture, they really spell it out, that in the afterlife, spirits are craving merit. And because it's kind of like a currency. Okay, it's kind of like a spirit currency in the afterlife. And when you pray for them, you're putting coins in their pocket so they can use that for other things in the afterlife. Sure. So I make sure, my dad passed away a couple of years ago. I make sure to always pray for him, my grandparents. And, when I come up and interact with these spirits at these locations, I'm like, do you want us to pray for you? 9 times out of 10, yes, please pray for me. I'm like, I'm right there. I'm praying for you. So, and I have certain mantras that I use to help them and give them a lot of merit and good karma to send their way, because that all helps as well.
I just love what you do. That's all I can say about it. I mean, I just love your philosophy. I love it. It's not, for me, it's not out there. Because, like I said, even though I don't do exactly how you do it, but I have been doing similar things for the last 25 years, and people have laughed at me on my own team.
Yeah, I know how it is, because I've been doing this. Like I started. What I do didn't come overnight. Okay, don't get any delusions that I just did this overnight. When I first started, I started back in 2006. I was a fan of TAPS, Ghost Hunters. I was like, oh, cool. This is a methodology. I didn't know there was stuff to actually, go with the spirit world with. This is pretty cool. But then about 2010, I saw collectively all these shows kind of hitting this wall where they'd get interactions happen, but they didn't really take it that far. So at the time I was researching things like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, different scriptures of the past. And I started to learn things. I'm like, wait a minute, what if I tried this in the spirit realm and see if this happened? And by God, it worked. So I started, writing a book, and that's when a lot of things came together. And I called myself a ghost behaviorist along the way. And I tell you, once I called myself a ghost behaviorist, that's when a lot of animosity started. They're like, what's a ghost behaviorist? I got to talk to this guy. And especially when I did conventions, they didn't like it because a lot of the diagrams that I would sit out, especially like the one I showed you previously, the flow chart of the afterlife. Right. I've got a nice colorful blow up picture of this that I have at my booth at a convention, and it just attracts people in. They're like, what is this? I need to know more about this. They don't know why they're drawn to it, but they're like, I need to know more about this. So my booth the entire time will attract more people than the ghost celebrities that they've paid to be there, which is amazing. And then what happens is they don't have me back because I make everybody look bad. So it's like, and I'm like, come on, just have me back. And they're like, no, we can't have you back because you're just making us look bad. So, but people want to know this stuff. People are starving for answers because we keep hitting these people with comments like, well, energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be altered. I swear, if I hear that phrase one more time, I'm going to freaking scream. Let's talk about uncertainty principles and, hungry ghosts. And, I've also come up with a theory on how spirits are able to manipulate energy on the other side. And this is taking, a lot of education from the medical field. There's something called psychoneuroimmunology, which states that there is a trinity in our bodies, which says that collectively our five senses, our emotional state is, let me say this again. Our emotional state and our immune system and our nervous system are all tied into one. Okay. If one gets thrown out of balance, they all go out of balance. And you can see that when you get sick, everything goes down. All shields go down. Right. So when you die, this trinity is broken because you no longer have a nervous system because it's tied to your physical body. You're only left with your mind, and you're only left with your immune system. Mm-hmm. So when you die, you're trying to find that third part, and when you die, you latch on to this energy-like field that now becomes your immune system. So what I find is that on the other side, you're able to manipulate energy to how you see fit because now your mind is tied into energy. Okay. And this is why demons can manipulate the physical realm because their mind is tied into it and they're very strong. Okay. And this is what happens. And this is how we get residual hauntings. Okay. When a person dies, bam. Okay. They're driving along, bam. They don't realize what happened. So a couple things can happen at this point. They could go through what is called dissociative disorder, where they totally separate themselves from the whole, the whole reality of them being dead. And since their mind is tied into the energy realm, they can create a world where that exists. So when you go into a location that kind of feels like it's stuck in the 1950s or whatever, it might be, because if that spirit is trying to cancel out all the pain that is associated with their death, they're still living in 1950s, going about their daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people like, who's that guy? Jeff Bellinger. His theory is that, it's a time slip that we're experiencing when it's a residual haunting. Two periods of time are just kind of bridged together. And my problem with that is, well, where does that exist in nature? Explain it. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take the psychoneuroimmunology definition and apply it to this, it makes total sense. Because what happens is they're going through their daily routine of doing the dishes, doing the, whatever. And you're, as a ghost hunter, if you're going in and you're saying, like you said earlier, you're slapping a cell phone down and saying, hey, do you know what this is? They're canceling you out because you're part of the pain of them being dead.
Right.
Now this ties in with a lot of hauntings at the battlegrounds. Gettysburg. Now, if you talk to a lot of people that have had experiences in Gettysburg, it's always the reenactors. Why? It's because they are dressed. Yeah, they're dressed in that garb. So what happens is they're not dressed in modern day clothes. They're dressed in just how somebody would exist back in the 1800s. So they are going to pop into their world, into this residual haunting world that has been created because they look and act the part. They know the social norms of we're tying it all together. They know the social norms of how to get into this little pocket universe that has been created by this spirit. And once you do that, once you pop that bubble, then now you have to heal them. You have to push them back into a hungry state, because if not, they're just going to keep going through the emotions and keep locking up that pain. And this is heady stuff. So if I'm losing you guys, I'm sorry, but you have, and that's the whole point of this thing. Going back to the diagram here. So in the middle, we have the hungry state, and you have all the different mind states branching off from that one. And what we want to do is we want to bring them back into the center, into that hungry mind state, because once we do that, then we can push them to where they need to go, higher level, lower level, wherever they need to go. If they need to be reborn, hey, go for it. But we have to neutralize their mindset to move them on.
Right.
I know it's a heady subject, so
no. I get it.
I hope I encapsulated
I
that.
I hope the listeners get it, because I had a psychic tell me one time, these are humans that died, and if you were a certain way when you were human when you died, you're going to be like that in the other world. And so that's how you have to go about this, is you have to think of them like yourself as a human, and maybe there was an issue, like you say, that's keeping them here or keeping them coming back. And that's what you have to address. And I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. I want to touch base with you because, I love it.
Certainly. And let me just, if you guys want to learn more, I do have a YouTube channel. It's called Ghost Doctor. I've got 12 episodes so far. And each episode, I try to bring something new to the table that you've never seen before. One of the episodes, I went to a cemetery just to show, like, I'm so sick of these ghost hunting shows where they're like, or ghost hunters in general saying, well, there's nothing at cemeteries. If you die, what are you going to do? Just hang around in the cemetery? And I'm just dumbfounded. I'm like, well, you don't understand the paranormal world that well if that's your mindset, because what I find at the cemeteries is a lot of the parasitic type of spirits. They're there to feed. A lot of, like, most of the spirits in the afterlife, they're feeding on something. Even if they don't realize they're feeding off something, they're feeding off something. And we find a lot of parasite spirits in the cemetery. I've had more camera batteries go dead in a cemetery. And in this episode, we went in the daylight. Okay. And that's another thing I wanted to show, that you don't have to go into haunted locations at night. Go in the daytime. You can still find stuff. It may not be as much, but you can get stuff in the daytime, and you can interact with this stuff. It's called the Woodlawn Cemetery if you want to search it. But just a fantastic episode. We interacted with the Wright brothers, which was kind of cool. So it's just an all around fantastic episode.
Well, again, like you say, I mean, these are human that you're dealing with, even in the afterlife.
Yes.
And like you say, who knows what problem they died with? Who knows what's bugging them in this afterlife to hold them here? And right. That's the idea, is to go in and figure that out, and then help them from there so they can move on and do whatever they have to do.
Right. And that's why I say, I don't call myself a ghost behaviorist lightly, right. because I do understand a lot of the plights that right. are going on with the afterlife. I just don't want to go into a situation and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And it just, when I come at the spirit world in this manner, my success rate is just like 1,000% over what it used to be. And if it isn't, I take it personally. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? I'm like, ugh, because I had this investigation a couple months ago where I went into a location with a couple cameramen, and I couldn't get anything to happen. I'm like, what is going on? This should have worked. And so I walked away from that investigation. I was beating myself up because I'm like, I'm touting myself as a ghost behaviorist. And what I ended up concluding, I'm like, wait a minute. The one cameraman that I hired to come with me had a very bad energy to him. He was a heavy smoker. He was very disheveled looking. And I was like, I bet it was him. Doggone it. So I convinced this lady if I could come back. I'm like, I need to try it again, just for my own sake, because I'm like, my reputation's on the line. So I went back with a different camera guy, and I'll be doggone, things exploded. So I was like, it was him. So when you go out to the field, you just can't know what you're doing. You have to present yourself in a way that attracts the spirits in that they want to talk to you. So there's all kinds of factors that play into getting interactions, not just
now, when you
outward.
first started doing this and getting all these interactions, did you find that even like with my team, when I'd be very good with EVPs, that I'm getting good EVPs, but I have been accused of faking it, even from my own team members, because this is a person that's a debunker, and they just, like you say, they don't have the right mindset to do the stuff, or there's something about them that the ghosts don't like. So then I get accused of faking my EVPs. Have you ever been not accused of faking anything, but kind of like, ugh, I don't understand why you're getting this. I don't think it's real.
Sure, of course. There's, and I don't want to mention any names, but
Sure,
there's a podcast that I was on a few years ago. Probably, I don't know if he's a household name in the paranormal community, but I was on his radio show, and I was telling him that, hey, I got a 90-minute interaction with a spirit. I was talking about my classification system, and he did not like this at all. I find that people that make money off this field do not like me.
Sure.
Because I'm coming in and I'm blowing apart everything that they've built their industry on. Mm-hmm. So when I come in and say, well, collectively the paranormal field has hit this wall, I found a way to surpass that. Mm-hmm. What I do just, you can't learn it overnight. And I think that threatens them. So, when I was on this podcast, he was very condescending. He was very passive aggressive. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, wow, dude, I didn't mean to step on your toes or anything. I want to get this knowledge out there because I want to advance the field. I'm not looking for fame and fortune or whatever. I just want to help spirits. I want to help people because, this problem is only going to get worse.
Right.
Because we are in the most materialistic period of time in our history. And when this generation dies off, they're going to be so attached to pop culture, to TV, to movies, I don't know if they're going to let go.
Right.
There's just so many things that they're going to latch onto. We're going to have so many haunted items going into other people's houses. I mean, it's just going to be a free for all. And if we don't know how to, the basic things of cleansing a house, we're going to be in trouble. So I'm trying to get this knowledge out there, but you have people like the guy, the podcast I was on, just like putting a boot on my head being like, no, stay down. But on the upside, I'm bringing stuff to the table that you can't suppress anymore.
Right.
You know, I've done pitches for networks, and it's the same thing. You know, the boot to the head, like, no, go away. You know, you're going to ruin everything type of mentality. But I'm bringing stuff to the table where I'm starting to get manifestations on command. I'm not kidding here. Like, I just posted a video on my YouTube channel. Look up Ghost Dr. Chris.
Okay.
I ended up getting this ghost hand on command because I was talking to this woman about how in the afterlife, I'm like talking about how she manifests and stuff like that. And all of a sudden this hand just zips across the screen.
Wow.
And it was amazing. It's been picked up by a few news outlets as well. So fantastic. So, I mean, this is just tip of the iceberg stuff. I feel like I'm just now hitting. So it's just going to be crazy in the next couple of years, I'm sure.
Well, you worked really hard at this, but you've had a lot of years to practice too. I mean, like you say, it didn't happen overnight.
No.
It was trial and error doing this stuff.
Yeah, I was a ghost hunting tour guide for 5 years, and I really got my chops there, man. And this place is super haunted. I interacted with all kinds of spirits. Now this was a convent, so I at one time. So I interacted with nuns. I interacted with like very dark demonic type things there, parasite creatures, you know, you name it. Shadow people. So it really put me through the ringer. So I know what I'm talking about. I've been there, done that. So if you're just like, hey, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, you know, I've done it. I've been doing house cleansings recently where it tiptoes into exorcisms and things like that. And you get some nasty stuff coming at you. And this stuff is not for the layperson. I hate to tell you, like if I'm, and this has happened many times, I wake up in the middle of the night, I see this cloaked thing coming at me. You got to know how to deal with that. You know, and I have kids in the house. If you don't know how to remedy that right away, you know, they're going to come after you. Then their next target is your kids. So I got to make sure to cut that off at the pass as soon as they get in here. So it's like, you have to have a calling for this or it's going to just destroy your life.
Do you think the TV shows have led to the hysteria for people that, you know, at first when I started out 25 years ago, it was like when you went out on these cases, it was always somebody's grandfather was haunting the house, you know, or a cousin or something. And now almost every call I get is, I know it's a demon. And it's
I think it's
come on, do a cleansing, and you know, and then you're like, well, we don't even know what we're dealing with. One cleansing is not going to fit all, so we have to get out there and physically do it. But they want you to come out, do a cleansing, and just leave them alone. It's like,
that's just the problem with evolution. I feel like they don't know where to take the field next. It's just the most obvious step. Like, okay, well, we've done grandma. Like, let's go demon, and let's go super demon. Okay, mega demon. Like ultra super mega demon. So it's just like upping the game every time. You know, it's like with the Freddy Krueger movies. At some point, it's like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. So, but I mean, it does exist, but you know, I think it's getting to the point now where I've seen a lot of people online too talk about this, where they say watching paranormal TV is now bringing stuff into their house.
Yes.
And I've had the same thing happen to me. Which sucks because I love watching Zach. He's the only one I love watching. Because you know, say what you will about the guy, I feel like he's the only one trying to propel this field forward, but I just don't think he has knows the exact tools of how to do that. You know, I will give him credit. The other guys, I just feel like they're resting on their laurels, and I'm not trying to single everybody out. You know, they were back in the day. I love these guys; they were great. But I'm just like, okay, well, what else do you got? We need to evolve this field, and they're just not doing it. But to answer your question, you know, pop culture is the same way. We're at a point now where it's like, well, what do we do now? You know, the big thing was the superhero movies. Now we're at a point where it's like, okay, well, what do we do now? We're just doing all kinds of goofy crap. And you know, it's like every movie announcement, there's just all these groans and like, oh God, they're doing this. So we're just waiting in the paranormal field for something to break. And I'm hoping by myself presenting a lot of this stuff to the paranormal field, you know, I can be the one that helps, you know, pull away from, you know, the stuff that we've seen over and over again since 2010. That's not to toot my own horn. I just the paranormal field really needs a shot in the arm, because I feel like it's just stuck. It's just collectively stuck. I go to these paranormal conferences, and again, I'm not trying to crap on the paranormal field, but the problem is when these things are always interestingly set up. You have the paranormal people in one corner, then you have the local people in another corner. And the problem with the local people is I could take one banner off a table, put it on another banner on a table, and it would look like the exact same group. Everybody's just like a carbon copy of each other. So I'm hoping by me coming in and showing that, I don't have an acronym for my name. I'm not, Orbs or Toast or, whatever. I'm a ghost behaviorist. I do this by myself. I have, I bring people in time to time. I don't have a TAPS group. I don't have vans that I run around in, and I have my own tools that I use. And it's just like, everybody's like, well, I'm very scientific about this, but I'm not overly scientific. Everybody says that. It's just like, oh, come on. The paranormal field is starting to become a caricature of itself. Let's find the next step here. What are we doing?
Yeah. And the other thing I found too is that people watch so much of that stuff on TV that when you go out to a house, they'll tell you flat out, oh, I did this. I did a dowsing rod session. I've got a K2 meter here. I've been talking to whatever's here, and it's just like, and things get worse. Well, yeah. Well, honestly, sir, you can't go by what you see on TV. You don't know what you're doing,
Yeah.
when you're out here. And I find that sad too. Because, for, like you say, for what it's worth, when the TV shows first came out, they were good. They were fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree.
But then, like you say, it's all a cookie cutter, everything. And like you say, the groups are all interchangeable now with how they do stuff and all this. And I think it takes somebody like you to change that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And again, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. It's just what I see. And it's just not the paranormal field either. It's a lot of different fields. It's just, you're trying to find something new. And I feel like we're at this point now where there is just so much, I'm trying to find the right word. There's just so many like close-knit circles that won't let anybody else into the party. That were like, what are we doing here? It's like the gas companies, we have free energy stuff. Like, come on, you're not fooling anybody, but they're keeping all that stuff out because they're like, hey, you're going to ruin a good thing here.
Right.
And I find it's the same thing with the paranormal world. It's like, no, we can't let you in. You're going to ruin a good thing here. Right. And it's just like that way across the board. You keep seeing the same actors in movies. You keep saying the same directors being put on these movies, and it's always the same names over and over and over again. We don't really see anybody new, and it's it's time to turn over a new leaf.
It's stagnated now. Everything's stagnated. Everybody gets the same type of evidence. Everybody uses the same equipment to get the evidence. There's nothing fresh out there, to get better stuff, to get better evidence.
Right.
That's why, like I said, that's why I was excited to get you on, because it's innovative people like you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
It might take a while to get it spread and out there to people, but it will start spreading.
Go ahead.
Like, for instance, I do sit. I'm not saying I do exactly what you do, but I use similar techniques. Therefore, I'm going to incorporate some more of your techniques into what we're doing. So that's one group.
Perfect. And I hope, I hope they work for you.
Just doing it, and then it snowballs. Yeah,
and of course, all throughout history, stagnation is the mother of invention. There was in the early 1900s, there's a man named Erik Erikson, which came up with the different, Emil Kreplin, that there were all these, back in that day, they labeled everybody insane, even if they weren't insane. Schizophrenia, it wasn't a thing. Manic depressive wasn't even a thing. Being gay wasn't a thing. But he came in and was like, hey, there's such a thing as schizophrenia and manic depression and bipolar. And then, boom. And now it's just commonplace in our culture. So you know, the stagnation, like I said, is the mother of all invention, and we'll get to that point one day. But you know, we just got to get over this hurdle.
Exactly. When we talk about residual hauntings, let's go back to that really quick.
Certainly.
What do you think they are? Because I mean, it's one of these things where it's a playback. So is that Did you still believe it's an impression on that, and you know, the energy in the house that person keeps coming back, you know, for the playback, or do you think it's something else?
Yeah, I think it could be a couple things. I just don't want to label everything residual,
Right.
because I feel like some things are an echo. You know, what I find is that if a tragedy went down in a location, you've scarred that location. Okay, you have to go in and cleanse the area of its of the scarring, for lack of a better word. In Judaism, they actually have a philosophy where, you know, if you're pouring your energy into something in a room, that the room will soak up that energy and leave an imprint. And I feel like if a murder went down or something very bad went down, same thing happens. The location just soaks that up, and every so often it'll just replay, and we get residual hauntings. But on the other side of the coin, we have these spirits that have made their own pocket universe because they've died abruptly. Okay. And they're trying to cancel out the pain. And when they cancel out the pain, they're just living their day-to-day life and just creating their own echo. Okay. And the best the best example I could give for this was on Ghost Adventures. Zach Baggins went into this bar, and he was trying. There was a so-called residual haunting at this bar, and he tried so hard to get an interaction with this spirit. And the only way he was able to get interaction was by sitting at the bar and ordering a drink. And it worked because this bartender who was said to haunt this location, you know, if he canceled out the pain of being dead, you know, he's still serving drinks to people. So by Zach sitting down at that table and ordering a drink, he just popped into his little micro universe by, you know, doing the day-to-day stuff. And he was able to recognize them because it wasn't painful for him to see him. So he came into his universe. I don't know how long he lasted there, but, you know, he broke into it.
Absolutely.
Nonetheless.
Absolutely. Chris, this has been wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If you don't mind, I'd like to keep in touch with you because I want to start tooling more of my team stuff to add your stuff in with my team stuff so we can do better work out here in the field.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and I have a new book out too. It's called Haunted Toledo. Okay. I know it's a local flavor, but I have a lot of my interactions with spirits and conversations that I get with them in this book, and it's very, very educational. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm very
It just
impressed.
transcends local flavor.
I'm very impressed, and I want to incorporate the stuff.
Oh, so, great. I hope you do.
How do people get a hold of you, sir?
They can find me on Facebook. They can I've got a contact on my YouTube page. Just find me there. And yeah. All
right, fair enough. Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate you coming on again, and I hope you have a good rest of the weekend.
Oh, you too. Thanks, Charlotte.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was Chris Boris, and wow, that's all I can say. And like I said, I'm really impressed with the way he does things, and I am going to start incorporating some of that stuff in with California Haunts, paranormal investigations. I'll tell you, because it's really similar to a philosophy I've been thinking about for a really long time. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, and hope you have a good night. See ya.